Welcome to 3S. 3S is a system rooted in ancient history and guided by modern technology. It is the combination of all ancient wisdom teachings refined through experimental science. It is intuition proven by mechanics. It's one world described simultaneously as both purely material and wholly spiritual. My name is Shiva, and I'll be your guide through the ancient hidden symbolism that links science with spirituality. Walk with me as we explore a perspective that turns our view of the universe inside out.
We've all heard the term energy thrown around in various communities. It's used very generally in the spiritual community, and while they've put these specific borders on it in the scientific community, they haven't really done much to define it more than in a very general way as well. They say how to use it, but they don't understand it. Nobody understands it very well. Just like a computer can have knowledge without actually having understanding, there's a lot of times we have knowledge without having any real understanding. So let's try to put these two communities together and make one thing that gives us a real understanding of energy. Truly understanding something allows you to predict something about it that's never actually been observed. The ancient masters knew this, and they used understanding as like a way of taking knowledge, like a bunch of parts to an engine, and then once you put them together, they become greater than the sum of the parts. They're no longer just a pile of shaped metal. Instead, what they do is they take these pieces put together in just the right way, and that creates understanding. It does something more. The way it's organized is what's important. I think there's some irony to the fact that you have to know what understanding is to be able to understand energy. You have to be able to know the difference. And the thing is, energy is much like understanding in that it is a way of putting things together. It is a property of something that allows it to be something more than just a pile of parts. Energy is the whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. More specifically, the scientific concept of energy is actually the flow and configuration of the ether. It is the specific way those things come together that create what we fuzzily call, still, energy. With this definition of energy, we now have something that gives us a greater ability to predict what it does, where it will be, how it interacts with things, knowing that it is a property that has to do with configuration. While some of these concepts are probably very familiar to most of us, the thing is a lot of times they're very overly generalized and they can be somewhat trite even to a certain extent. So what we'll be doing is talking about the very specific mechanics behind these things and to that which the generalities refer. So the first step in this is to talk about what science refers to as the mass energy equivalence. Up until the last century, science was known as the occult because it was hidden things. Occult means hidden. The thing is, in the ancient times, there was a caste of magicians who held this secret knowledge that was not allowed to be dispersed among people. And the way in which it was always practiced was as a dual practice. There was as above, so below. There was this duality that was central to the scientific practice, or what was known as the occult. Isaac Newton was an avid studier of alchemy. Well, now alchemy we call chemistry, but we've removed that dual portion of it, that part that makes it both science and spirituality as one practice. And what I want to do is bring those two parts that were broken apart arbitrarily back together again. And so we'll have a type of synergy that gets us where we want to go. Of the many pathways that the knowledge could have taken as it, winded down this road and that through secret societies and in religions, etc., that finally made it down to us, the very best way in which we can get at that knowledge is to look at the oldest and most ancient writings. So, cuneiform and Sanskrit. In fact, it was Nikola Tesla who first recognized that the ancient teachings that were found in the Vedic writings were applicable as real technology today. He once said about why he was very interested in the Vedic texts and hung around with Swami Vivekananda. He had a quote that I want to give to you now. Unsurprisingly, the brief description that Tesla gave is actually a perfect summarization of what we're only now discovering through the Coude experiments. There's in fact some theorists at MIT who have been working on these silicon oil drop experiments to find a completely new mechanism that is underlying what we thought of as just pure chaos to be a real mechanism that we can understand. And then there's theorists at Cambridge have been using that for a new model of the way that particles are created at their source, not just a belief that there's the smallest particle, but what's underneath that. And they're actually providing these models that will give us a better understanding and be able to predict from there, will be able to give us a type of technology from there that will expand our knowledge of the universe. So in this paradigm, all electromagnetic interactions are actually just motions of the ether. So you have like electricity and magnetism, those are actually just localized alterations of the ether. So this rebirth of ether theory actually casts ether or the akasha or empty space as the true hard thing, harder than diamond. But the thing is, it can spin so fast at such a small area that it rips itself open. And those holes, those black holes, are actually what we think of as atoms. So here we have a perspective that makes it so that what we think of as solid is actually holes in what's really solid. And the thing that we think of as nothing at all or empty space is actually the real solid of the universe. That real solid can have a configuration. It can have parts to it that are put together in a way such that it can hold information. This is part of superfluid dynamics. And this information then could be thought of as the Akashic record. So what you have is these vast, what appear to be empty spaces, are actually gigantic bodies of knowledge that grind against each other. And as they do, they spin up. So what we think of as the material world, as galaxies, they're actually the borderline between what seems to be more ephemeral and the real solid world of the ether. But most importantly, it is the motion of the machinery that makes it more than a dead thing. It is the combination of fuel and an engine. Only together do they make something that is useful and greater than just a dead thing or an explosion. As we further explore this system called 3S, we may have to sometimes arbitrarily disconnect two sides of one coin so that we can understand the way that they're connected together. So, as an analogy that's very useful to us, we'll continue to talk about the engine and the fuel, or we'll talk about a computer's hardware and its software. So, think for a moment about how you can take an engineer and they can describe a computer or a tablet or something like that in terms of, charge separations or whirring drives or, individual little electrical, interactions and magnetic interactions and, configurations. And all of those things can be a very dead way of describing something that, as a person is using these things, he may be slaying dragons, he may be making new friends, he may be purchasing things, he may be changing his life through what can be described as this, just set of interactions that are very mechanical and very dead. And you can describe this experience in two ways, and these two descriptions of exactly the same events can seem like descriptions of wholly different events. And the same is true of the spiritual world and the physical world. We can describe the same thing in two ways. And one seems kind of dead, or at least seems very cold or calculating. But in fact, it does describe the same thing. It is a true and valuable description. It's this relationship between the physical and the spiritual that 3S bridges. But because the physical world is more in our face and right here, we're going to have to describe the hardware of spirituality before we start to discuss the software. Now, the entire time that we're describing the hardware, you must know that the software is also there. But we have to talk about these parts so that we can bring these two aspects, these two halves of our greater mind, our collective unconscious, back together again. To fully grasp this ancient understanding of reality, we're going to have to talk about modern interpretations and how it is specifically that we have these various interpretations, such as pilot wave in Copenhagen in quantum mechanics, and why it is that we would select one over the other. The reasons why we select one interpretation over another has to do with the way that we put our information together, just like the way that you put an engine together. We'll discuss how a system of values is actually a type of energy that expresses itself through invention and is interchangeable with the scientific idea of energy on the next episode of 3S.
The secrets of the 7 sages have filtered down to us through cultures, mystery religions, and secret societies. Magi have purposely hidden and obscured knowledge deemed too dangerous for the minds of the common people. From the deadly secrecy of the Pythagoreans to the Eleusinian mysteries, like the many parts to an engine, these shattered pieces of knowledge have been preserved but must be reassembled. The leftovers of iconography and metaphor paint a fuzzy blueprint which only now, in the light of modern science and computer technology, can finally be recognized as the parts of some greater workable system of knowledge, an engine of both spiritual and very physically real technology. From the grandest vistas of the spiritual big picture to the deepest technical details of neuroscience and physics, we'll show you a new view of the truth never exposed to the modern public before as we attempt to reunite the divided spirit of our age.